So the first thing is there are, I'll close this all. There are two ways of doing massing or approach massing in Revit. The first one is to open your family editor and work in that environment. And the other one is in an actual Revit environment, which I'll show. So I'll start with the family editing. So True Family was basically built for building family types, whatever they could be, and then through this list you can see what are all those different types of things that you can do. But for now I'm just gonna pick a generic model. But if you go through this list, you'll actually see there are some very interesting tools that you can mess with here. So I'm just gonna make a generic family type, and it will bring me to this environment to start creating stuff. So very basic tools up here that you can use and work with. So the first one is extrusion. So very simply, as you can guess, you can just draw something. Where am I? You can just draw the profile. Okay. One thing that is important whenever you're modeling stuff is where your work plane is. So always make sure, like in this case, it doesn't let me draw anything on my plan because it is reading the work plane from a different angle. So I'll just set it, and I say I want my plane to be my reference level. Now this is my work plane, and I can draw in that. So I'll just skip that, and I say OK. Now I have an extruded form somewhere here that looks like that. So whenever this is created, I can now start manipulating things in it. So if I go to edit extrusion, I can go back and change my profile. That's one thing. So let's say I want to change this like that. Delete this. As it was mentioned, sometimes the trim does not work, so you need to do it manually. And then you kind of start editing some of these and moving things around, which we'll get to. The next one is to create a blend. So it is getting two different shapes and blend them together. So again, it's reading a different work plane. So I'll just set it to my reference level down there. I want to have this guy as my base. On my top, I want to have a circle. And there I'm defining what is the distance between them. And then when I say OK, it will just connect those through. So that's another way of dealing with massing. So you can switch between top and base, move them around, and you can also edit how these are connected. You can twist, kind of like the I think it's the loft in Rhino that does kind of the same thing. So you can decide how you're going to twist around and how you're going to connect these things together. Next one is the revolve. So in revolve, if I go to an elevation view, you would pick an axis, again setting my work plane, so drawing an axis, and then drawing something around it. You need to make sure it's closed. Not sure if I can close that. I'll just add a line. And when I say OK, it will just trying to show that geometry. Actually, looks like that, and then you can go back and edit all these different features that you were working with. That's the revolve tool, and then you got two sweep options as well. So the first one is sweep, where you have a path, just draw a path here. And then if I go to my 3D view, I can now draw my profile. So sketch path, I'm done with it. Continue. What's wrong? Kind of lost where I am. So then you can pick the path, and then you can draw your profile on it. Why didn't it show up? Oh, that's the plane I need to pick. I don't know why it's doing that, but you would basically be able to extrude something along a line. So this is how you would do in your family editing, and then here you can cut and join stuff as well. So that's one tool. I just wanted to quickly show you guys that this exists. But the more interesting one for me, and I think for you guys, will be the mass editing tool that is inside Revit itself, or you could also access it through a different environment that will show you. So if I have a 3D view, and if I want to do a mass in place, let's say OK and give it a name, it will now bring me to a new environment that is very similar to if I was doing a new and conceptual mass. So these two are very similar. Mass in place in a Revit environment or a conceptual mass file are very similar. So I'll just go to that new environment to show you guys what you can do there that is a bit more interesting. Okay, this is that. So again, the first thing is again the extrusion. So let's say you have a profile on the ground, and then you would create a solid form, so it does that for you. And then the difference is now you can pick easily different elements in the mass and move them around, and kind of model your stuff. You can move them. You can also rotate them. And I've worked with them that way. So you can pick your points and edges and faces and move them around and edit them. You could also add edges. So if you want to add a new edge, you can do that. So you can add a new edge here, and however you want to edit your stuff, you can add new tools and go for massing. So this is kind of friendlier for us, more similar to other software we were using before. You could also add profiles. So this will go so if I add a profile, it should basically go all the way around my geometry and just add a new profile there. And this will again give me, I think I canceled it. This will give me new points to move things around, as you can see. You can also make new things. So let's work on making a sphere here. So if I want to make a sphere, I would just draw a circle. I'll select that circle. I'll say create my solid form from it. Then it will give me two options. Do I want a cylinder or a sphere? I would say sphere. Then I will select that, and let's say I want this to not be a solid form but be a void form. And that means that it's actually cutting from existing objects. So not cutting. should cut. Okay, let's try a simpler geometry to figure out what I'm doing wrong. One more thing that I heard through the presentations I think is worth mentioning is that a lot of times you want to do things that you can't. A lot of times it's us not knowing how to use the softwares, and sometimes it's the software not doing it properly. So always set the default to be I don't know how to do this. Then if it didn't work, say okay, now the program does not know how to do this. Don't put your default being the program doesn't know how to do this. Okay, there we go. So it worked now. So the solid form, the void form would cut through a solid form, and like that, you can see.
Select the void again.
Yeah.
You just press that.
Yeah. There. Yeah. So I guess the previous one I just needed to come out of the selection. I was inside the model editing, so that's why it didn't work. Okay, so you can do solids and voids. You can also join things. So let's say I wanna add a piece to this geometry. So I wish I had my previous geometry here. So let me see if I can. Just go back there before I did this. All right, here. So I want to join stuff to this. So if I want to add a piece to it, I can start drawing on its faces. So let's say I pick that face, and then I start drawing series of lines there. Zoom in and move that to match that corner. Then I will create my solid coming out of it. You see that it's a separate geometry, and that is a separate geometry. I can, just to make it a better example, I can bring it out and maybe down a little bit. And then I can select these two and join them through that tool. So now those connections should make better sense. I'm not 100% sure if the cut tool would work if it's not a solid. Apparently it did work, so it cuts through as well. So you can join and cut, similar to the wall thing that I showed you guys right now. And then you can add several objects and try to do now some more interesting massing here. I'm gonna go back to the Revit environment so that you guys can see that you can do almost the same things in Revit itself. So if I go mass in place, I'm basically in the same environment, so I can again make all the stuff that I was doing before, and editing them here. Those form generation tools that you saw in the family are available here as well, but it's basically depending on how you put your base geometries and then say create the form from. It doesn't say do the sweep or do the blend. You just need to give it the beginning tools and just ask it to do that for you. So for example, if I want to do a sweep, I will start with maybe drawing a curvature here on an elevation. So set my work plane, pick a work plane. Okay, go there. Okay, now I need to define some work planes just to make sure I have them. Now go to 3D view. Now I'll go back to my mass in place. Okay, I'll pick that as my work plane. It will ask me to move to a different view, which is fine. I'll go there, draw my curve. There. Then I'll go maybe to my 3D view. You can see my curve is there. My planes are not showing up. I guess they're hidden, but it doesn't matter. I can just copy this whole thing. Oh, sorry, I need to copy this over there, back to my 3D view. Now I can edit this one a bit differently, so if I pick the points, I can move them around. Now if I select my both lines and go create a solid form for me, it will just connect those like that. So it works similar to a sweep. There. So if you do your sweeping here, then you can go back always and kind of do the same things you were doing in extrusion. So you can add edges there, like that, and edit them. You could also edit your profile. So click that and go in and change this afterwards. You can add new profiles to it. So if I select my overall geometry and go add profile, I can add a new profile, and I can now go in and edit that new profile. Okay. There are some other tools here that, as you can see, if you have your edges selected or you have your overall surface selected, if they will turn on here. So you can see it in X-ray. You can add edges and profiles. You can dissolve so it doesn't show the surface, just the ruling curves. You could also divide your geometry. So if I select that and start dividing it, it will divide my surface like this for me. So it's not a very good example. Let me just make it a bit better. So I can move it out. Oops. I can. What's the point? I can. All right, doesn't matter. So let's say that's the geometry I'm dealing with. I can change this pattern to being a rectangle, as it is, or being a hexagon, and then give it some numbers as how many I want to have, or what is the dimensions of these panels I want to have in my geometry. So let's say I want to do a 35 by 35. So now it's a hexagonal grid, and I can now go. For example, I want to really define this as load a family into it that would read as a curtain wall system or a glazing system. So I would make a new family, and I will make it a pattern-based one. So I would go to generic model pattern-based here. Then I would select my pattern. I would say I want it to be a hexagon again. It will give me that. I'll select these and make the solid from them. And then it will give me the options. Do I want it to be flat or extruded? I say flat. I also want to add a profile into it, so I need to add a point actually, and need to define a new work plane there. Now I can draw a rectangle around it. I will select a rectangle and I'll select these lines and just make the new solids from, like that, and I'll load it into the family. I could also change the materials here, so if I can select that guy, now I can give it a material, just basic glass. Now and then I can load it into the project. I'm not sure which project it was, so I'm going to load it to all of them. Okay, let's find Reaver in this view. Okay, now if I select this and then under hexagons, this family 3 will show up, which I can replace, and then it will place that family on the mall here. It's thinking.